Well, yeah, I know a lot of my friends end up having issues with, depending on sexual status and where they are, have a lot of issues with being
Mm.
made fun of wherever they are in their sexual status. So, I mean, it's not just virginity, it's all over the
Exactly.
place.
Yeah, and I think everybody, regardless of age, has been made fun of at one point or another about any aspect of sexuality. It's just one of those things. You know, it's a very private thing unless you choose to tell others about it. Clearly, other people know this person's status, and that's something to keep in mind as well, how much you share with other people.
Yes. Okay, our next question. Where's the G spot?
Wow. Okay. You know, that's a difficult one to answer because there is a lot of controversy about the G spot. So if I were to just answer where it is, if I start out that way, that seems to suggest that there is unequivocally agreement on the fact that there is a G spot, and there isn't. So back in 1950, a physician by the name of Grafenberg, so it's the Grafenberg spot, and it's frequently spoken of as the G spot, but Grafenberg found or identified this patch of cells that is sort of situated differently in the female vaginal canal, and he estimated that the location in general in the clients that he saw was about 1/3 of the way up into the vaginal canal, and it's on the interior wall of the vaginal canal. So that means on the belly side wall, the front side wall. And obviously, it was a male doctor. He didn't have one of these, but he noticed through examinations of his patients that on feeling the tissue there, it didn't feel smooth like the rest of the vaginal canal. It felt sort of striated, so it felt like it had a little bit of a pattern to it. And it varies in size when it is something that's detectable in a female vaginal canal from a dime size to a quarter size. Now, the reason that I started out saying I can't go directly into answering the question, Jonathan, is because some women don't have a spot that can be identified by that difference in texture. And in fact, some physicians have looked for the G-spot in their female patients and haven't identified any tissue either. So the initial controversy about the G-spot is whether or not each woman has one. However, after Grafenberg proposed in 1950 the existence of the spot, it was sort of forgotten about. Nobody talked about it, and in fact, nobody talked about it again until 1983. And what's interesting to note about the G-spot is that in those women who do say that they have it, in those women in which we can observe this different striation in cells, most of those women will say that that spot becomes increasingly sensitive and pleasurable, a source of pleasure to touch during sexual arousal. The other thing that's really neat to note about the G-spot is that it's also associated with female ejaculation. Now, I don't know how much we want to get into this right now because we haven't really had a question about it, and we can save it for some other time. But suffice it to say that about 8% of the female population during some stimulation of the clitoris, which is the external female genitalia, or the internal, particularly the first 1/3 of the vaginal opening, and yes, the G-spot. About 8% of females regularly or fairly regularly expel a liquid. And sure, you may or may not have heard of this, but if you type something wrong in an internet search, you could mistakenly come across some footage of this, but it's very noticeable when it happens. And so between 1950, when the G-spot was sort of coined, and 1983, when they started studying it again, lots of women through G-spot stimulation and also stimulation of other areas were, during arousal, were becoming excited. This was a pleasurable stimulation, and this ejaculation was happening. And they went to their doctors, and the physicians between 50 and 83 called it weak bladder. So they told these women that in essence that was urination. And then in 83, when some scientists decided to reawaken the study of the G-spot, they suggested that it's not urine. it's a liquid that is expelled, but it's not urine. It has some similar components, but not as much urea, which is what makes urine. So, just to summarize and sort of go back for a second, the size of the G-spot varies. Whether or not a woman has a noticeable area that can be identified as a G-spot varies. The desire to have that stimulated during sexual excitement varies from woman to woman to woman. It also varies within women. So where you have one woman who finds that stimulation pleasurable today, she may not tomorrow. So there's a lot of variability there. Next, it's associated with female ejaculation, which still does remain somewhat of a mystery. And therefore, we like to tell women and those who are partners of women sexually that it's not necessarily something you can find, not necessarily something that's pleasurable, and that if it is associated with female ejaculation, they're certainly welcome to ask their physicians about that and their GPs and their OBs, but that in general it's a fairly normal response to stimulation of that area. We don't know evolutionarily what it's for. We don't have any suggestion what it's for.
Okay, so our next question is, I've heard some girls say that the guy needs to be big, and others say that they prefer it to be average. Is it just a preference, or is there advantages and disadvantages to different penis sizes? And does it matter in terms of pregnancy?
Wow. Okay. First of all, there are a lot of misconceptions and preoccupations out there with penis size. We find study after study that suggests that men, if they could change anything, it would be their penis size. What's important to note is that the average penis size is about 5.25 inches, and that's erect. There being an average, there are smaller and there are larger. There are significantly smaller and significantly larger. What we find is that although women will frequently some women will frequently talk about preferring a larger penis to interact with, and the data are still being looked at in the homosexual population in terms of what they're preferring or talking about. Independent of all that, the obsession seems to start with men, in that men are wanting larger penises or talking about larger penises, thinking that women and other partners want larger penises. So just to sort of summarize that, looking at that average, what that'll mean is that about 98% of the male population has a penis size that is erect, is 2 inches and some change to 7 inches and some change, somewhere in between there. A second aspect, though, that I wanted to talk about is one that people frequently don't discuss, and that is the fact that males and females who are partners of males, sexual partners of males, can have a much more significant problem when the penis is too big.